The first film I made was called Unexpected. The film is a thriller comedy about a young woman who decides to cut through a forest on her way home in hopes of finding a shortcut, but soon finds herself lost and, in the isolated setting, hearing strange noises, her paranoia quickly begins to grow. For this project, I took on the role of director. In preparation for my role, I spent a lot of time thinking about which films I wanted to draw inspiration from and planning every single shot in the storyboard to make sure each one effectively communicated the story. As Alfred Hitchcock wisely said, there is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it. I thought this was especially true for our film, as the twist at the end immediately diffuses all the tension, so it would be all about the build-up. And I knew the more tense the build-up was, the funnier the payoff would be. I didn't want the viewer or the protagonist to become aware of the man's presence right away, but wanted to build up a feeling of unease through the visual language, giving the sense that the woman is being watched. To do this, I included voyeuristic angles like in Nash Edgerton's short film Bear. I also thought of incorporating stylistic elements from the opening scene of The Silence of the Lambs. I really liked the implicitly unsettling atmosphere of the scene. The increasingly tightly framed shots, fast-paced cuts, and intense music, along with the desaturated color grade, all contribute to an intriguingly menacing feeling. I was also strongly inspired by certain shots from the film It Follows. In my opinion, this film is a masterclass in making an audience paranoid to the point where their imaginations start to play tricks on them, as there are several points throughout the film where you see someone walking in the distance, out of focus, and you feel a sense of panic that this is the monster, when really it was just an ordinary person walking. I told the DP that I envisioned several shots of the protagonist walking in the foreground and the man in view but completely out of focus in the background, with a focus pull as she hears a noise and suddenly turns around, but he disappears behind a tree just as she does. Overall, I think our shoot went reasonably well. When filming outside, particularly in a forest, there is always the risk that the light will noticeably change as the day goes on. However, we managed to stick to our schedule and work efficiently enough to mostly avoid this issue. Besides this, I think the actors did a really great job, and we got some shots that turned out really well, with a few shots, like the close-up of the knife and the POV whip pan, turning out just as I had envisioned them. However, this was not the case with the entire film, and we ended up having to improvise a lot of shots which were completely different to the ones which I had planned. This was due to one big problem: our lenses. Our DP took out two lenses, one of which was an extremely zoomed-in telephoto, and the other was a wide-angle zoom lens. However, for some reason we were unable to get the wide-angle lens to focus properly or change the depth of field. This was a real problem that caught me off guard, as it rendered the aforementioned shots that I wanted completely impossible, as they were wide and included focus pulls. I think this change really hurt the final film, as those shots were extremely important for building the suspense, and although we managed to think on our feet and come up with replacement shot ideas, I don't think they had quite the same impact. Next time I direct, I will check with the DP and make sure I am aware of the exact lenses we are getting, and make sure that we test them before we take them out to ensure that they work properly. In regards to health and safety, since we were using a real penknife as a prop, to eliminate any risk of accidental injuries, we made sure the knife was kept securely closed and in the actor's pocket at all times that it wasn't in shot. Aside from this, since we would have to go up quite a steep slope to get the high-angle voyeuristic POV shots, we made sure to determine a safe route that wasn't too slippery during our location scout prior to the shoot. The second film I worked on was The Promise, which is a supernatural drama about a woman who wakes up in purgatory and meets Death, who breaks the news to her that her time is up. Not ready to accept her fate, she pleads with Death to give her another chance, and so Death places 3 cards on the table and promises that if she picks the right card, she can return to the mortal world. My role for this film was first assistant camera, though I also filmed certain shots myself, helped with lighting, and came up with some of the shot ideas, such as the opening POV shot of the ceiling and the high-angle bird's-eye view shot. I had never taken on the role of focus puller before, and so to prepare for my role, I did some research. I read articles on the blog The Black and Blue, in which professional focus puller Evan Lucy gives tips and advice for his profession, and also read sections of the books The Camera Assistant's Manual by David Elkins and The Camera Assistant, a Complete Professional Handbook by Doug Hart. They all contained similar general tips about camera assisting, such as familiarizing yourself with the distances within the location that you will be filming in, so that you can more quickly and easily estimate the focus, and being wary of common mistakes such as pulling at the wrong speed and focusing too close. I kept these tips in mind during the shoot and found them to be very useful. Once we had all brainstormed and nailed down our narrative idea, I immediately noticed the thematic similarities to Ingmar Bergman's classic The Seventh Seal. With this comparison in mind, I was able to really visualize how our film could look, and I thought it would serve our film well to try to emulate Bergman's striking, highly cinematic style and imagery. No one else in my group had seen this film, so I rewatched it and took some screenshots that I thought might work nicely for our film to draw inspiration from, and then showed them to the director and DP. They liked the idea and said they would keep it in mind when drawing up the storyboard. And although not all the shots we discussed made the final cut, I think you can definitely see the Seventh Seal's influence in our film style. Overall, I think the shoot went really really well. I managed to always keep the shots appropriately focused, and in general I think we did a really good job with the cinematography and lighting. However, there were a few minor details that I noticed when watching the film back that I wish I had noticed on the day of the shoot so that I could have fixed them, such as the emergency exit sign on the door at the back of the church, which ruins the illusion somewhat of this being some kind of purgatory rather than just a regular modern church, and which we could have easily found a way to cover up or avoid showing. Besides this, in the shot where the protagonist slams her hands down on the pews, one of the paintings in the background is noticeably crooked, which is admittedly a very minor detail, but because the shot has such a beautiful symmetrical blocking, this imperfection stands out and it would have looked much more visually pleasing if I had thought to straighten the painting. Finally, in the reveal shot when we track around and see the 3 cards, you can see the shadow of the camera moving. Next time I will pay more attention to light, shadow and angles to make sure this doesn't happen. For health and safety, we had wanted to set up more candles around the table, but decided against it as having candles anywhere near the long tablecloth seemed like too much of a fire risk, so we stuck to just a few small candles on top of the table. We were also careful to set the lights up according to how we'd been taught in our health and safety workshop to avoid tripping hazards. Film number 3 was a horror drama titled The Plunge, my role for which was editor. The story follows a mysterious young woman who is horrified and jealous to see the man she loves with another woman. Her relationship to the man is left ambiguous and up to the audience interpretation. Perhaps they are in a relationship and he is two-timing, perhaps they are exes, or perhaps she is merely an obsessed stalker. Whatever the case, her passionate feelings of betrayal are clear. She is so outraged that she decides to take action, and we learn that she is in fact a witch as she creates a voodoo doll of him and impulsively drops it into a lake, drowning him. Once the idea for our film had been nailed down, I immediately started trying to visualize how we could do it, and I kept thinking of how important the scene where she makes the doll would be. I saw this as the most important scene of the film, as it was both a critical character moment, as our main character decides to take the plunge and go down this extreme path from which there is no return, and also the crux of the narrative, when the genre of the story is made clear. The first thing that sprang to mind for me as stylistic inspiration was the opening scene of Coraline. This was a scene that I have always found incredibly effective, with its brilliantly eerie and foreboding atmosphere. Aside from the stunning visuals and spine-chilling music, I feel that the editing is particularly effective in building up a sense of anticipation and curiosity in the viewer about the nature of the doll and its creator, and, more ominously, what it will be used for, as it lingers on certain close-up shots of the tools used in making the doll for just that little bit longer at times, emphasizing their almost ritualistic significance. I also thought this idea of slowing down the cuts was a good idea because of something I had read in Sidney Lumet's book, Making Movies. In the book, he says, if a picture is edited in the same tempo for its entire length, it will feel much longer. It doesn't matter if 5 cuts per minute or 5 cuts every 10 minutes are being used. If the same pace is maintained throughout, it will start to feel slower and slower. And since the beginning of the film is edited at quite a fast pace, just quickly introducing the characters and establishing the situation, I thought it would be a good idea to slow things down here in the middle and start building up a brooding suspense. Overall, I am fairly pleased with my edit. I think the film has a good rhythm, the color grade turned out nicely, and I managed to somewhat fix the one shot that was noticeably darker than the others due to the shoot having run over long by bringing up the exposure. Still, there are certain decisions that I made that I am still not sure of. One of the main questions that I debated while I was editing was how to end the film. We had all originally envisioned the ending as it is, with a POV shot of the girlfriend as she frantically tries in vain to help. As I was editing, though, I thought perhaps I should end the film with a final shot of the doll in the water instead. It would have been a neater, more traditional way to wrap things up, whereas the abrupt cut to black from the POV shot was more stylized and jarring. I couldn't decide, so I asked the rest of my group as well as several other people. All my group mates preferred the final shot being the POV, and so that was what I stuck with, but to this day I am unsure whether I made the right decision. Similarly to the knife in Unexpected, the large pair of scissors and the needle that we used in the making of the doll scene were kept safely and carefully stowed in a crew member's backpack at all times that they weren't being used, as a health and safety precaution. My final film is called Calore, an Italian language comedy about 2 cooks intensely preparing a meal. At first the audience is led to believe that they are professional chefs in an Italian restaurant. However, it is later revealed that they are in fact just a couple cooking dinner for some friends in their home. The joke being that food is taken so seriously in Italian culture that what looks to us like professional restaurant levels of cooking is in fact just regular everyday cooking for this couple. For this film, I was in charge of all elements of sound, recording, design, and mixing. As research and inspiration for this film, I watched the movie Chef. One thing that stood out to me about the movie was that they managed to make all the cooking scenes very engaging and enticing, and I thought about what techniques were used to achieve this. I think that sound plays a big role in these kinds of scenes, as they make the cooking scene more tactile and appeal to the senses more. The director thought we could do without sound effects for the slow motion shots, but I thought they were important, and when I showed him the comparison, he agreed with me that the scene felt flat without them. One thing that I'm especially proud of in this film is that I think I did a really good job of finding music to match each section of the film. For the kitchen scenes, the director gave me a 2-hour-long piece of music that had the general tone he was going for, Vivaldi's 13 cello concertos, and I combed through the entire thing to find little snippets of music that I thought best matched the energy and action of each particular scene. It was a long process, but I think it really paid off in the end. There were a couple shots after we filmed the smoking scene outdoors where I forgot to take the windshield off, so the sound quality wasn't as good and there was a little bit of hiss. I managed to get rid of the hiss in post, but next time I'll remember to take the wind guard off when indoors to avoid this extra hassle. One shot where I had to pay particular attention to health and safety was the shot of the head chef tossing the frying pan full of zucchini, with spilled oil causing the fire to blaze out. I had to be very careful while recording sound for this shot, as I needed the boom to be close enough to the action to get clear, crisp audio, and yet far away enough that it didn't get burned.